welcome to another exciting adventure of Riding Through the Unknown. I'm your host, Michael, and for those of you who are fans of this show, you will recognize my guest as he was on before. We had to pre-record that episode, so we are grateful and appreciative. Tonight, we actually get to bring it to you live, and so I'm going to allow my guest to share what he has been up to lately and get us started into the show. His introduction is in the first episode, so if you are wondering, you can catch up there. But I think we should just jump into and cover as much information as we can. So I am going to turn it over to the one, the only amazing, super talented author, great speaker, Dr. Richard Allen Miller.
Thanks for helping me stay out of prison and jail for not having any money. Can I buy my books? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm military and I only get Social Security, not pension. And so, that's all I have incomes on. And today, if I didn't write books and, scrub like I am right now, I'd be in debtor's prison. Seriously. It's a creepy day now. And I'm grateful that I'm being able to save lives, help people. My intent, the way I go about what I do, is my father taught me to leave things better than I found them, including your mind. That's what I'm about.
That's a beautiful thing. We need that these days.
That's intent. That's the way you go about your purpose.
And so Derek is saying hello to you.
Who's that?
Derek.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Hi. I wished I were. Sorry.
So, if you want, we can jump into. You sent me an email about
Last questions, I'll respond. Yeah, let's do that. I don't want to lead. I'm Spock. I'm not the leader. I am like Spock.
No, we need that in this world. We need people like that. And so one thing that jumped out in the dreams that you were telling me about, and we actually were talking a little bit about it backstage before we started, is the synchronicity. And while I was looking at that, I was wondering, and maybe you can touch on this, and maybe I'm trying to combine two different things, but how does the synchronicity play into the Schumann resonance?
That's an interesting question. Schumann's resonance is a pretty well calculated event of how hurricanes and storms occur on different sized planets. Schumann's resonance on Earth is 7.83. When Hainsworth died down in Perth, they offered me tenure to complete his work for the United Nations. And I did it in 2 weeks and said goodbye. I didn't want to live in Australia anyway. And I was honored, but not what I want to do. And that paper was called Voice of the Planet. And Schumann's resonance on Titan, for example, is 4. That has to, where there's lots of storms and cracking bones, and God's throwing his bolts down, and it's like a bolt of lightning and hitting a spot, the same spot. Have you ever been hit by a bolt of lightning? Believe this or not, it's one of the experiences I actually went through like a little girl. My daughter dying in my arms because of leukemia. I have probably experienced more things in my life than normal, and I'm grateful because now I know what I don't want to do. Cocaine, swinging, that kind of thing. Well, you have to actually. What I try not to do is make the same mistake twice. And I have had a lot of train wrecks. I'm like the Addams family down in the basement with my train sets coming at each other, and I'm all excited,
That was Gomez.
What's that?
It was Gomez Addams. That was the train enthusiast.
The originals, yeah. Today there's good black humor still out. I liked Wednesday. That was a good series. She had that dark look in her eyes, you know, and it was
Oh yeah.
wonderful. Yeah, but it isn't like old school, and you'll notice, like Saturday Night Live. I remember when it first came out, and the humor every 10 years changes, and it's different for different generations. What's funny and so on. However, how did they put it in the movies when he said, "Wait till you get a load of me"? That was Jack Nicholson. As the Joker.
Right.
His bloodshot. He lives up near Canada in Washington State. He's in one of those estates just going into Canada, and my my daughter used to do his yard work, and I got to know him. I got to know a lot of really famous people because they wanted to meet May. And May, I'm no big deal. I don't think of that like that. I just have black humor. And when Jack Nicholson walks up to the alien, he says, "Why can't we all just get along?" And the alien's got a little tear in his eye. That's probably the way it's going to play in reality. And you've got to laugh your way through things, because if you were to take any of it seriously, you'd be like me. Made you laugh. That's good. We need more of that. Actually, we do. It's
Yeah.
going to be pretty rough shortly for a lot of people. I've gotten a preview, and I know how to hum some of the bars. I don't want to be the lead, but you go right ahead and ask me those questions. And what makes me different is I'm circular. I'm not linear like Max Stein. Matt was my partner, and we used to do urban survival skill workshops for upper end police and the military. And Matt's very linear, goes right straight in, where I kind of right in that way. I'm circular. How did that old thing go? Jack Sprat could eat no fat. His wife could eat no lean, but together, oh, they licked that platter clean. Everybody got it by the end of the show. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Medic code blue.
So, do you think synchronicity is what's causing like Gordon Michael Scallion's map to be coming true and the flooding that's going to be occurring?
Carl Jung, synchronicity, where nothing happens by chance. Um, did it happen because it was predestined, or because you thought it was predestined? That's chapter 8, the mind's eye, where imagination is reality. Now, I don't want to pour soup into my coffee, but I have by accident. And I would rather be, I think it's time for all of you to realize that you should have a go bag, that if you heard the news, you could gather whatever you thought was necessary within 10 minutes and be out the door as a backup to what you think you've got now. It's your go bag.
So, where do you think Gordon Michael Scallion got his information that he predicted this map? Wasn't it back in the 1980s that he
Earlier
used?
than that, and actually it was, there's a lot of people before that. You'll notice there's a bunch of different maps on, future maps of the world. And they're based on science. They're based on visions. Edgar Cayce, that have high accuracies of predictions. These things are interesting. That concept is called billet reading, which is different than the work I did with extrasensory perception. I was at Mission Control in 1971 to do the ESP studies with Ed Mitchell. And back then, ESP and hypnosis were pseudosciences. And they used me because I was real good at isolating variables for so-called repeatability and reproducibility. That's what gives physics its solid foundation. However, Physics won't get you there. And that's something I've said repeatedly before. That's why God gave us two brains. It's, with Malcoma in the middle. You're right? No, it's left and Malcoma. And when you do that, I just pig-lipped you, and then I can slip a command in that you don't hear. That's NLP, neurolinguistics. I have an eidetic memory, which means I don't hear music, I see it. And I'm like a little kid. And one of the 147 unfinished manuscripts is suggesting that children are probably our single most important natural resource. It'll be them, not us, that saves this world. And I was gifted, so I know the difference. And why would we want to send our children to school to become us? Really.
Yeah. That's one of the great wonders of the world.
Yeah, it's exactly so. They think that, that we're all thinking the same thing and it's all nice and smooth and happy. And my generation, I was in Cambodia and lost, there's no bone in this arm. It's gone. I did that as a civilian, training SEAL Team 3. There's something else going on. I think we're in a petri dish. There's no free will. Free will would imply full disclosure. Since you do not have full disclosure, you don't have free will. You have true will. You work on what you do know. And some of that's been programmed because we like them a little fatter. They have extra flavor to it. What does that mean? It means I've seen hierarchies of forced cetacean in food chain. That means I've watched orca chase dolphin, to eat them, literally. And they have a bigger cerebral cortex than man, twice the size of man. And that mammal is firing 60%, not 10, like you and I. What's going on? Well, one way of looking at things is all about food chain. And if aliens have been here since forever, what happened to Homo neanderthalis that has 3 rings in the DNA, not 2? That mammal, we didn't evolve from apes. We created them. And Homo neanderthalis, we made more humped over. And we didn't come from apes. They came from us. Something else, a child, when it comes out of the womb, way, way smarter than you or me. What's going on? Homo sapien only has 2 rings in the DNA. Homo neanderthalis could experience 5 dimensions, not 4 like man. What might that suggest? Where are they, evolution-wise? We get to a certain point of accomplishments, like spaceflight, Vimana, we've been here before, those kinds of terms. When I went through India, way back when I started to want to meditate, train my mind as a tool rather than believe it. I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't believed it. I stopped off in India on my way to Tibet and got initiated by Sharon Singh himself. And I'm a satsangi, and I've been meditating and training my mind since 1979. Thank you, Lord. That's why all your saints in history have suggested the importance of meditation. And I can now testify that's one of the reasons it made me into the weird cream pie that I am. Another one that's extremely important is keeping a diary. Whether you do it on a computer, do it handwritten, what you're doing is moving information from right to left brain, daily writing your experiences. And those experiences are like time travel, and you go back to your diaries, and you'd be surprised how you feel when you do that. It takes you right back to that moment. Now, with all of that said, that's the beginning, not the end of things. And all forms of meditation lead to Rome. But some are good for this person. This one works for me. That one belongs over there. With that said, why are all our wars about judging others?
Right.
You're not supposed to judge another person, and that's not just Jesus Christ saying it. The only person you can judge is yourself. What made you God's favored was choice. And just because that person is doing it differently than you does not mean that person's wrong.
I agree.
Well, that's just one part of it. The second part is whether you agree or not. Why are you doing it then? Page 2. And it goes on like that until you have an awakening and you realize the only reason I go to church is for fellowship. I'm seeking a group of people that have values I aspire toward. And not everyone in that church belongs there. And I'm seeking to become a better this way, while you might be wanting to be that. And yet, the Jews versus the Arabs versus the Christians versus the Christians. How many different kinds of Christians are there?
Depends on the day.
What's that?
I said it depends on the day.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Oh, it's Friday now. I can be a Nazi. It's crazy. Oh, it isn't Friday yet. Sorry.
It will be in a couple days.
Yeah, exactly. Couple. That means more than two. Couple and several. There it is. English.
Gotta love English.
I'll come back now. Yeah. Don't let the door hit you in the back. Yeah. Well, it's all different.
Yeah. I have an interesting question for you that a lot of people ask me and probably would love to ask you who aren't on here is everything you see is based on what you've seen in the past. And if you get into quantum physics with entanglements and everything, we can alter if we know something. So
the Heisenberg, yeah. That's right. What the hell is that? Dang, what is that?
So is it possible to alter what you've seen coming so it passes?
Yeah, that's what you're using the mind as a tool. You change your belief to suit your purpose and what you're trying to do and why you chose to be in Horror on Elm Street, Part 12. This is a dream. It's not real. There's dream states that have more content to reality. My mentor worked at Maimonides, Dr. Stanley Krippner, and he wrote a book called Dream Telepathy before I was. And then when I did the holographic universe, he brought me back to New York in 1970 at this conference purposefully to introduce me to Ed Mitchell so that I could be at Mission Control in 71. And Stan has been my mentor all these years, and he has other individuals like me, but I'm one of his B+ students, not an A-, a B+. That's what I got in high school because I lettered in sports as well as be a nerd. I remember in 1960, before NASA took me back to Canaveral to change Greek mathematics into English code, I did code. I was one of those kind of kids. I used to sneak out every day to go down to the World Fair in Seattle and watch Sir Laurence Olivier play Hamlet. I got a degree in English literature too. Yang. I mean, it was incredible. To see someone of that quality in a field that, I'm a math whiz. That's what I do is mathematics. I changed Greek mathematics into English code. I didn't do the binary. I did the nor and, and or not, or what you call object-oriented logic systems. It's a form of logic. And I did that at almost 16 years old. And he was incredible. The hills of Dunsinane and beyond it's incredible. I still remember everything. I'm like a little kid that is 4 years old that never turned 7, and I'm now in an 81-year-old body. But I still know how to martial arts.
Well, you do look good for 81.
Maybe. I have to use vibrators now instead of. I'm kidding. how did she put it? It's not for pussies.
Oh yeah, gotta keep those muscles going.
Yeah, it's interesting though because I don't feel different. I feel like the same me. I don't feel like I'm losing anything. Whoops, there goes another rubber tree. That's Frank Sinatra. Oh yeah, it just slipped your. I watch your eyes the way they move. That's how you know what people are thinking. I had a kid once in the book I'm writing on Children Ask the Darndest Questions. This was with Dr. Norm Shealy and I. And we did like 2.5 years of weekly radio where sixth graders could get on national radio and ask questions nobody could answer. And one of them, Gunner, I like that name, is that pigs are so smart. How come parrots can talk and pigs can't?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I said, well, bird brain comes to mind. The parrot has no idea what it's saying. And when a pig wants its way, it sure knows how to communicate that to you, body language and all. That's why the saints in history like to talk about darshan, eyeball to eyeball, where you're right up there and you can smell the person. You got odoriferous molecules, you got body language, you have a whole bunch of things that are happening in communication. And texting, and then you got to go through and check your spell check and all the other garbage that takes time. Formatting, da 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 da, do 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 do, da 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 da. You know, that's crazy.
Yeah, auto correction is not always your friend in texting. It has gotten me into many a trouble because
With the emojis or whatever they call those little symbols, like oh down. That's a different one than the middle finger, and of course the thumbs up and the one in the nose, and let's see, there's a thumb in the ear. They don't do those emojis anymore, do they?
no.
That's what I wish I'd have, those old ones. They were much better than that little, pig.
Some of them you can't even tell what they are. They make them so
Exactly.
small.
That's because they came out after you. And that's the other part of it. Each generation has a different set of values, and they're going downhill in a handbasket. I'll tell you that. It's like powder. Ah! Anyway.
So I'm kind of looking at, another aspect of the synchronicity, and I feel like it's something that kind of backfired on what the powers that be wanted, and that's when we had the lockdown.
Yes. I bet
All of a
it's
sudden, a lot of parents started homeschooling.
yeah.
And so now schools are shutting down because they've lost their students. And so I'm wondering, is that like an aspect of synchronicity that they didn't account for, or were they secretly wanting that to happen?
Okay, here's my response on that. The correct answer is yes, all of the above. Anything you could imagine is possible. It's not only true, it's even more than that. We're sugar ants in Gaia's kitchen. Can you imagine what she must think about humans right now with plastic and our so-called better living through chemistry infused in everything, including her kitchen, which is the ocean? Put out some taro, make sure they all have a lot to eat to take back to the nest. That's an experiment they did with Ant-Man down in Mexico, where we had hive consciousness. Something else is going on here, and I don't have a clue yet what it all means. And the bad news is, like you, I probably will never really know. When you wake up from your dream, how much do you remember of it? Oops. Oops.
Sometimes more than others, and sometimes none at all.
Yeah, exactly. It has to do with the types of dreams, because there's different kinds of dreaming. That's another thing that they did at Maimonides, my mentor. What I'm doing is other things that people can't explain but are repeatable, like extrasensory perception. Just when I go to the YMCA, I practice one of them where I practice my breathing take breath control, and what I can do is change my perception of time. And that's how I took my martial art to a paranormal level when Chante Chung came all the way down from Victoria every week to teach me Tai Chi. And that was one of the altered states I gave the SEAL program that allowed them to be super soldier, one of the altered states, because you have the precision, you know. You experience it slowly with the detail, precision, and yet you can take a whole group of people on by moving this, moving that.
So, interesting question for you is, for example, like when I see Tai Chi or martial arts movie, my mind automatically, I can see my hands doing the same motions they're doing, but I've never had a course. But yet it's like I'm actually following along with the movie, even if it's the first time I've seen it. Is that a marker of I've actually done that before and just the memory was
You have a lot of memories of other people. What's the difference between karate and, let's say, hangao? Okay, karate is straight in. 2,000 years earlier, it's a circle, which is superior. Exactly. And the Chinese were there before the Japanese. And each of us developed different things where they're functional because of who and what and how and why you're in where you are. Environment, history, why you're here, not there. And actually, it's been shown, I've done some studies where, and that's what I did with the Diamond Body. My new book out is called it's Bilocation. In 1974, I moved the Menninger Foundation from Topeka, Kansas to the University of Washington and added video. And that was the birth of cymatics, or what we call sacred geometry, because there are certain forms of geometry that are recurring in everything, and they can do things like a geodesic dome, different than a monolithic dome. And there is, and in 79, I bypassed the use of drugs and went directly on the forehead with electric currents using a German acupuncture, Mora, Endomet, 1979, broke a code and proved it was your immune system's response to the drug. The drug is got toxin, but it has chemistry very similar to a neurotransmitter. That's why God put dimethyltryptamine in crabgrass. Most common, it's like a delivery system from God. The thing is, in crabgrass, it's 5-alpha dimethyltryptamine, which means you can smoke in a little glass pipe and go high. But your brain neurotransmitter, which is actually getting you high, is the N, N hyphen. And putting those two things together in 1983, I created our first wormhole and took 12 NASA scientists to Mars, literally. Now, creating what's called a Stargate, what you call Stargates, it was a wormhole. Now, that's bilocation because I'm already on Mars. Anything I imagine is true, is happening. It's easier to go further away than close by. In other words, I can't create a wormhole to go into next door, but I certainly could do Mars, and it's a lot easier to Alpha Centauri. How's that work? I don't know yet. It's one of those questions I don't know. NASA just discovered the same geometry on Saturn that I used in 1983. And if you don't think NASA doesn't want to know where that wormhole goes, what does that mean? Well, it means our solar system's a life form, and where it goes, I have no idea. And I don't actually think it's a magnetic pole shift. Okay, that's the way we comprehend it with our variables of going from space-time measurement to information and resolution, which is my holographic universe, And now I'm going into the multiverse where you're there and you're here and you're everywhere, except you can only do one person at a time. Where God or Lucy, the movie, she's everywhere at all times. That's the distinction between us and the next life form up. And when you start marrying carbon-based life forms with silicone-based life forms, computer chip, iRobot, even Isaac Asimov, who's a physicist, when he wrote iRobot, knew there had to be rules of engagement. I did the first public demonstration of an AI back in 1972 at Claremont. And it's called Project Paraphile. And I can tell you that's one of the books I wrote. Nobody was interested in that. I've never sold any of those. But that's okay. It's okay. It was a grant that we got, and I went in, I had a religious church do a bunch of key punching on a 360 at the University of Washington, and then I had a portaphone that I went down and I'd take questions from the audience. We had synergy and serendipity and Buckminster Fuller concepts. Bob Marshall is another paper I'm writing. Bob Marshall in the Marshall papers was the idiot savant that worked with Buckminster Fuller, and nobody could understand him. And so they brought me in to translate because I'm a little different too, and I was able to do that with a bunch of hedronists. Hedronists are sacred geometry people, numbers. And Marshall was a real genius. I'm not kidding. I mean, Riemann, one of the chapters on Riemann. Riemann challenged the mathematical community to come up with a mathematical expression for recurring primes. And none of us have been able to do that. Marshall did it on a yellow tablet. What he did is he envisions a cone with a certain pitch, and the way he does his numbers, so it pitches down this way. And then he did numbers going around in the opposite direction in a different pitch, and was able to draw a straight line through them. Recurring primes, 17, 19, 21, that kind of thing. Base 10. And that's just chapter 6 in that book. And the second book I did with children is I interviewed them when they turned 21. And I asked them how being on national radio and asking questions, competing with your friends, on trying to get the most complicated question without anybody locally, libraries, professors, couldn't answer, their parents. And how being on national radio to do that, how it affected their career choices. And that's a second book I've written, hasn't been published yet, on children reform. It's interesting.
It is, and we've been talking about sacred geometry, and I can't help but remember in the 90s and 2000s, everybody was all about the Fibonacci.
Oh,
And then the Fibonacci disappeared, and you don't hear about it much anymore. And I've often wondered,
440 is up instead of 448, you mean?
right.
Yeah. Fibonacci is a thing you find in sunflowers, and you can see it spiraling. And that's a hive consciousness thing that had to do with bumblebees and the way they pollinate. Arbitrarily, it seems like it's random, but it isn't. And there's another one that's interesting when you have a whole group of, sparrows, whatever, and they're startled, and then they swarm, and they start to go back in different patterns, and how that varies with sun and the variables on that. And that's our new definition of space, which is called cosmobiology, the geometric relationship of celestial bodies on biological processes. When a woman is born, an engram set on her DNA on when she ovulates, which means if she moves to a different location on Earth, her ovulation cycle changes, and you have natural birth control. That was 1972 in Prague.
I don't think I've ever heard that before.
That's Lunar Sex Cycle of the Female by Janif out of Yugoslavia, 1972. That's one of the things I studied. That's why I went to Yugoslavia in 1972. There's a group of us actually, and a big conference there. It later became a book called Krippner edited it. There was the energies of consciousness and psychoenergetic systems. That's what it was called, psychoenergetic systems. And there's a couple old farts like me that are still around that were lead chapters in that book. I was toward the end because I wrapped it all up in one big thing called the holographic concept of reality. The only reason I didn't get to go to Stockholm then was that Gabor had just come out with his thing about the hologram, creating a hologram. It's working for old man DuPont, the experimental research station. There he is. And I walked by and I saw this three-dimensional thing, and I had to go in and talk to him about it. And that's when I came up with the holographic concept. The second year, I came out with embryonic holography as resonant cavity oscillators. And within 10 days, that was the second paper I presented at Claremont. I had the military all over me. They put me under close arrest, and I went through my files and classified it top secret until 1992. Guryaev and Popov, Russians, quoted from that, went to Stockholm, and now I'm working with two Russians out of Max Rumpel and another that on biologists that we're studying under them and are going to use me as the math guy that does the math on how the multiverse works. And I use from fractals, which is, a Mandelbrot or a Julia or a May generator. Well, fractals are limited just like time and space with uncertainty principles. And the more you know about one thing, the less you know about another. It's like Simon says, you can go halfway to the door. You can get close. You never get it, and that's why you have two brains, EQ and IQ. I'm IQ, which is not intelligence. EQ is intelligence. IQ is adaptability, how quickly I can adapt. You got to have them both, and then what that does is creates Malcoma in the middle. Humor.
So I have an interesting question for you, something that just popped in my brain, and I'm not sure what it means, but I was envisioning like the biblical spiritual sense of Jacob's ladder, not meaning the scientific electricity ladder, the other Jacob's ladder. And then I was looking at
downhill into the pits of hell.
Well, and then I was looking at the spiral when you were talking about the spirals, and I started to think, is the Jacob's ladder really a spiral and not this like single linear path?
Dean Foster, Alan Dean Foster wrote Outland. He's a friend of mine at Sci-Fi. He wrote another book called Star Wars, and then one of his books is called Into the Out of. Isn't that an interesting concept? A bunch of African medicine men are sitting around, and all of a sudden a hole opens and a bunch of demons start pouring out of it. And that's a sci-fi book. However, it's actually parallel universes and things of that nature. Anything that you could possibly imagine is true, and I've said this once, and again, anything. That's why you need to monitor and control your thoughts. That's why all your saints in history have stressed the importance of meditation. I'm a fourth plane, not fifth plane. I won't be. I've met fifth plane masters. When I went to Tibet, you know what the Tibetan Buddhists are doing up there? They have these big long horns that they blow to communicate across mountains. And they big horns, these noise. And they put 17 of those in a specific geometric alignment. It so compresses the air that large objects float, and you can push them with a finger. Now, where is that technology right now being used in our current society? It wasn't a bunch of elephants or mastodon pulling those big boulders. They probably used that technology. Who knows? We've been here before.
More sense.
It isn't about making sense. I want the rustle of dollars. How did Jacob put it? Greed is good. I mean, get a grip. I was watching this one on Netflix just now. It's excellent, by the way, of Alfred Hitchcock's life. Before, during, and after his classic movie, Psycho. Eat 'em, eat 'em, eat, 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 eat. It was an excellent movie and demonstrates some of the things I am trying to articulate. That's what I do is I can give you an image. It isn't my physics that makes something real. It's your mind's eye. When you can see it for yourself in your own mind, that's what makes it real.
So is
Pretty
that
much.
why when we go into meditative states, some people say we enter the astral plane, some people say we enter the real world, but others are that's the place where visualizations become easier to quote unquote visualize. Is that why? Because we're entering into the true state of who we are and the energy is more open to us because we're not limiting it through our
All of what you
ego
just said
or
is true. It's actually a light alpha state that I go to, and I go to a place called Satchikan, where I'm in part of a triad, not two, one male, female. I'm part of a three triad, uh, where we're in this thing that's sliding into geometry. What's that mean? I don't know. That's where my hypnosis professor, I got certified Gil Boyne schools. Uh, Instead of taking me into a past life, he took us into a future life.
so are future lives accessible because of quantum physics
No,
or
no, no, no. Future lives are a metaphor of like your dream states are. Are your dream states repeatable? Well, yeah, nightmares versus, feel good movies. If you write your dreams down each morning when you wake up, that's one of many different ways of identifying who you are and how unique you are compared to someone else. And each one of us is unique because of the choices we made and the choices we decided to not make. But guess what? It's also your limitation because some things have more imagination and can have more options to dismiss.
so I'm trying to figure out with where we're talking and other sciences that have figured things out. And one of the sciences I'm thinking about is where they have two plants in two different rooms, and you can yell at one plant, and the other plant reacts as if it's being
That's
yelled at.
Baxter's work. Yeah, the
Yeah.
secret life of plants. That's one of the things I studied. And it turns out what it is a migration of cell salts in the plant. Oh. How they communicate. And if here's the interesting one I did. What's the largest life form that we understand as a life form on Earth? It's a mycelium and the Blue Mountains of Oregon. And it's also the third largest life form up in British Columbia. And the second largest is Aspen Grove down in Telluride. But here's the interesting thing. The one up in Canada, I studied it. It acts exactly like my master's thesis at Delaware, where called excitation emission to VK center luminescence, and where there is a precursor wave and event horizon, where one side of the crystal instantaneously knows what's happening to the other side of the crystal. And I think it's the mycelium is the lunar, I think it's a cortex of Earth. Because when you have a forest fire or an impending storm, the mother tree sends out a signal, and the entire forest as a whole, using mycelium, knows instantaneously it's beyond time and space. Happens, bang, just like that, even though it's distances apart. And that's something they're teaching up at UBC right now in that field. The thing is, it acts just like a forest, acts like a crystal. Isn't that interesting as a metaphor? And that was Gregory Bateson when he said, "What is your metaphor but to serve your paradox?" It's how you connect one thing unrelated to another. And guess what? I put my two ox out in my meadow.
So is that what creates the
You're creating.
theory around telepathy between twins, where they call it
That's right.
twinepathy?
Yeah. It's a telepathy. That was dream telepathy was his original. But what I found it was there's an altered state. This is that ESP and hypnosis book I've written. That where you are right now is where you are right now is consciousness, and the state is right there. When you go there, not where you are, but right there with hypnosis, your ability in guessing is 400 times better than where you are right now. And Duke University tested that. They brought in Sybil Leek, Gene Dixon, the usual suspects, and I won that contest by 3 orders of magnitude because we all have it. It's just your psychics, like Edgar Casey, hang out there where you're more here and I'm over here.
So I have an interesting question for you. It's not on anything that you sent me, but I'm curious to pick your brain about. And
Oh,
that is,
but it can never
I can take a flight or a ship from the US to Europe or Africa, sail through the Bermuda Triangle, which is supposed to be a dangerous place, but I cannot get a flight from California to Australia. I have to fly north and then south to California or fly east.
Aren't you
Why?
going into the future? No, or the past? I forget. Oh, yeah, you're going into the future by 14 hours.
So
But
why is it though that planes you cannot get a flight from the US straight into
okay, so in
Australia?
1974, I flew over the Bermuda Triangle, not Bermuda, the Oregon Vortex in a PBY at 15,000 feet with an interferometer. Now, what bends the light at 15,000 feet? A mini black hole. And I'm going to suggest that the ley lines, the Bermuda Triangle, are all many black holes, a bunch of them, create sacred geometry where the Earth goes into the out of. And you brought me back into focus to answering your question. I don't think it's a magnetic pole shift. I think that's the way we see it. And what's happening is they're cleaning the petri dish with alcohol. Who knows? A Shadow probably knows. He knows all of it.
Yeah, he's always lurking around.
Yeah, I know. Get a grip, man. I know that I don't know. I'm real good at what I do, and you can't, from my end of town at least, get there from here. I studied with Roger Penrose at Princeton. He had written his book, The Geometric Universe, and I later wrote the Dodecahedral Universe, fine-tuning his work. I studied with Charlie Muses, who did hyperdimensional mathematics at MIT, and Edward Everett Horton, and Albert Sensgorky, quantum biochemistry. And I, of course, went out and wrote Legal Highs and Aphrodisiacs. Those were my first books. And then I started focusing more, not on psychedelic mushrooms. Then I wrote a bunch of work on gourmet mushrooms, exporting into Canada. And then I wrote a new area, which was called pharmaceutical mushrooms, ones with known chemistry. And basically, pharmaceutical mushrooms are superfoods. There's 72 different ones. They both are inhabited with polysaccharides and beta-glucans. These are large sugars that have multiple oxygen on them. And the polysaccharides are, sugar's a little tiny thing here, and then you got beta-glucans, which are geometrically a whole bunch of things, which means if you take a group of those, you put transfer vector, it'll work as an immune system looking for look-alike geometry coming in. But polysaccharide is this huge long sticky sugar. It's got over 100 oxygen molecules on it. When the oxygen breaks down and is released into the sugar, that oxygen goes right straight to ATP in your cell. And that's your little quark gluon plasma that you call your immune system startup engine. And you can't get enough oxygen in your body. You start using these pharmaceutical mushrooms, you can heal almost anything. Not get sick anymore. Now, what I did is a new delivery system. When I was working for Aloha, we ran those mushrooms through a jet engine at Mach 4, like you do cow manure, breaking it down. And it broke the polysaccharides down to 400 nanometer, which means it's like a little, asteroid going through our solar system. It just slides right through the cell wall. And that means instead of taking it as a pill, it has to go down into digestion, and then as the antibiotics coming up, murders everything. What you do is you put one little tiny dot around your tooth, and your abscess is gone within 2 hours. And you get 100% of the oxygen. You don't get 28%, which is what you get out of digesting vitamins and things like that. Your delivery system. Supposing you had bad lung, you lay on your back, have a little mystifier with water, you squirt it up in the air, and you let the water fall on your stomach, and it'll fall right straight through to the lung. Interesting, isn't it?
It is, and I can't help wondering, with all the stuff that's going on today in the medical field, if we're going to be returning to being able to get that kind of medicine and treatments versus all these chemicals that they keep wanting to pump us full of. And
plastic was everything. That was DuPont and our so-called better living through chemistry. Everything is plastic now. Everything.
I'm wondering, with all the changes going on, are we going to see those type of, like you're saying, these mushrooms that are the superfoods resurging and being available, or do you think they're going to keep suppressing it?
How did Tano put it to the Lone Ranger? He said, "Oh, we're being chased by Indians." Thanos looked back and said, "What do you mean, we, right, man?" Oh, man. Johnny Depp nailed that one. I loved it. It's so good. He just nailed it. Thank you. Thank you. It won't matter because there won't be very many humans, and there certainly won't be any manufacturing, and we're going to go right straight back. At least this part of Earth is going right straight back into the Stone Age like it did the last 5 epochs. Now, with that said, Saturn may be a get-out-of-jail card. The bad news is there's only seats for 144,000. Oh, boy! Just kidding.
They're all spoken for already, so.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I bet you some of them have the last name DuPont on it, huh? Well, I don't know. I don't think of it like that. I know I've spent 2 weeks in the jungles with Eben Alexander down in Mexico. My mentor took us, a group of us down there. The president of Mexico gave me a plate and a spoon. Ooh. Eben Alexander wrote a book called Proof of Life. He was a neurosurgeon that had a near-death experience. And I've talked to a number of people that have had near-death experience where they die and then come back to life, and what they experienced during their period of being clinically dead. And I think, I don't know, I haven't been there. That's one of the things, excited. I think death is waking up. I don't know that. That's what I choose to believe. My parents were atheists. They sent me to Missouri Synod Catechism to armor me for what assaults go on in high schools for missionaries. I came out of grad school and I knew there was something else going on here. And so what I did is I went out and I learned Old Hebrew and Greek, and then studied with Gershom Scholem at New York City College for another 6 years after graduate school. and I did my own biblical translations. And I made some discoveries that aren't discussed, from Qumran, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and some of those things. And did those things happen that differ with what the Catholic Church and some of the others suggest? I don't know. I wasn't there. But there seems to be some inconsistencies. For example, in the year 1000, when Pope Innocent I declared war on the Cathars, I can categorically tell you that that was the time when the teachings of Christ went in that direction and the Catholic Church went in the other. So I know I don't know. I'm not into religion per se. I'm into spirituality. You walk your talk. That's Ducky Mallard when he said, ethical man knows not to cheat on his wife. A moral man won't. I've made a lot of mistakes, and what I'm trying to do now is not make the same one twice. That's the best advice I can try to give anyone. Try to do your purpose as best you can and try to leave things better than you found them. In other words, you're leaving more than you took.
Right. No.
How do you say right? How come you didn't say left? Just kidding. That's called an idiomatic expression, and why the experience I had at Groom Lake with krill.
So we're getting close to the hour. Do you have time?
It was incredible. Alien, when she used emotions to communicate, and I can tell you candidly, 20 minutes of exposure with that entity was like a lifetime of words. And it's like she programmed me. And that's one of the reasons I sensed that she was my future, programming me to do what I'm doing right now. Leave some footprints. That's why I write books and write and communicate and try to do that. That's my purpose. Leave some footprints so that we don't make the same mistakes. We have direction, but don't follow me. I'm just Spock, living long and crispy. Captain Kirk is the leader. He has and has always been my friend.
I like that. And we're actually getting close to the hour. Do you have time to talk a little bit more, or do you need to?
No, I'm good. And you're always welcome to have me back, especially if you can get individuals that listen to you asking questions, and I respond quickly to those rather than be all over the map and so on. I can't help but when I started to think about krill, I go right back to that, and it gets very emotional. I mean, I have they spent like 6 weeks trying to debrief me because they didn't hear any words from back and forth between us. And I don't know how she did it, but what Alan Frey and I did was try to develop a technique or technology that was like that called synthetic telepathy, where you take 0.3 to 3 gigahertz microwave band and you heterodyne audio on it, and then what that microwave does is causes your temporal lobes to heat up and they ring, and then you can hear voices in your head and didn't go through the ear. Now that could be used in space. First application, turn it down so you can't hear the voice. Think it's your own thought.
That's a good point. And I did have a couple of questions that I was hoping to ask you if you have time.
Sure, I'll do. Oh, you want to play? Sure, no problem.
One question is, why do you think NASA refuses to put communication satellites around the moon like we have around the Earth so they can communicate with the shuttles on the dark side of the moon? Or is that something we've been told that's not true and they can communicate?
Well, I don't know. I haven't gone to the moon, so I can't answer. I can give you theories, but that doesn't mean I'm right. How come the moon doesn't rotate? How come there's a dark side of the moon that nobody's seen?
I think because it's an
artificial. Yeah, well, maybe the moon isn't the moon. Maybe it's a satellite that came into orbit 2 billion years ago when Mars and something, the asteroid belt, had a war, and man, it's all on Earth. Who knows what it all means? I could come up with all kinds of theories. How do we assess it? Well, we go there and take a look by. What happens when I know and I can't talk about it? Antarctica. I've been to Antarctica. Okay, I'll give you an example there. I've been to Antarctica. I went there in '74. We went through Thule Island in a sub and came up into the inside of Antarctica. And here's this cavern. It's over a mile high. And I was the physicist in charge of light. How does the light work in this thing? And that's where bioluminescence first started. It's a fungus that grows on the walls and it luminesces. Now, I saw a Nazi base, looked like it had been nuked. There were 19 slips and it looked like it had been nuked. Probably Kennedy, I don't know. Further down was a Viking base from 14th century. Where's that in the history books? And further down was this giant hole that went straight down into the mantle, 100 miles. We didn't have technology, even drones can't do that. And yet they did it recently with a couple of astronauts that told me that when they went down that thing, that's when they quarantined Antarctica. When they went down there, something woke up. What would that be? Nephilim? I don't know. Because I wasn't able to go down there. There it is.
Man, that is one trip.
Look, you took my yellow and now you're green again. Red. See how you're changing colors. That green, yellow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Red.
I
have one says there. They're getting ready to take him. Okay, good.
So I have one question for you that.
Sure have a lot of one questions, man. Cool. It's cool. That means I'm doing what I wanted to do. Open your mind. It's important.
You talked about bilocating to Mars, and I'm wondering if you, while you were on Mars, looked back at the Earth, because I'm finding...
We didn't make it to the surface. We only were underground. They had things that made the surface later. We were underground. That planet has more water than Earth does. It's a smaller planet, and all our water's underground. Imagine what it was like on Mars. I think it was a Garden of Eden before our garden. I think that's where the entity concepts that we discovered there didn't have 4 fingers and a claw, but they were carbon-based. They had digits, 3, like that. And they were carbon-based. Anything, like I said, anything with a face, 2 arms, and 2 legs is a carbon-based life form, including little green men from Mars. That means our whole menagerie of aliens that we have now cataloged, that's all carbon-based. That's our future, has nothing to do with aluminum, which I've seen aluminum carbon-based. That is so creepy. You can't even comprehend it until you see it, in action. And when you take silicone or some of these other metals and marry it with carbon, now you have hybrids and gene splicing, gene correcting, 2 rings on the DNA, 3 rings on the DNA. But aluminum, silicone don't have DNA. What's that mean? That's our future. We've already got our future as carbon-based.
So I'm wondering, as you're describing Mars, I know Frank Hubert's books and movies about Dune, the spice planet, where...
I know him, by the way. He lived on Shaw Island. Blake Island, excuse me. In the one if you could. He's dead now, but I used to go visit him.
So now I'm wondering if Dune is a representation of Mars, because the desert planet, the water is all underground.
Verm's in my mind. The Verm. Yeah. Well, a lot of metaphor. That's why I gave you that picture of my two ox out in my meadow. Gregory Bateson uh, was a scholar that I had to respect when he came up with that. There's people historically that are really important. They've done things nobody else did ever, and and I think we're all really unique, and we're all really important. Even the most mundane has some purpose here, and so I'm not trying to make a big deal about it, but I think how did she put it Saturday night? Isn't that special? I
Love the church
love
lady.
to see you laugh. That's where you belong. Mostly having a good time. It's important because the stress that I go through every day. Do you know how many email I got just today?
I don't think I could survive.
And I don't carry a cell phone. I had 8 days trying to get my orders off of Amazon, and I'm a bad, bad boy because I didn't take care of my orders. Well, that's when they changed my audio into I was supposed to have a cell phone saying text it to me. I don't do texting. I don't do. You know what you can do with a cell phone? Right now, I can have a GPS and I identify where you are and I am, and they can use you as a weapon to take me out when I get close to you. All they have to do is 7.3 gigahertz down the line, and I'm an 8-foot boom. Now, T-Mobile is using 6J, and we had a big ruckus about 5J. What's going on and why? They weaponize your cell phone. That's why I don't use one. And I don't like texting anyway. It's too slow. I can communicate a whole bunch more with a lot more depth with my video. Imagine what we can do in the future as aliens. That's our future. Carbon based. When we can do emotions.
8G is military use, isn't it?
I don't, well, you mean they used a 10J as what they call, it'll put a standing wave on your heart. And you can take out a group of soldiers on that perimeter. That was back. I've got a timeline I could give to you if you want to post it on electromagnetic weaponry and when they first started using it and where our future is going with it. Timelines on EM fields and use as weapons. Dr. Beal, a scientist down out of Florida, I have his book for sale on dead dosimetry, LD50 ratio, on all parts of your body. And just like your eyes don't like that ultraviolet or ultraviolet, like you have on your, the LEDs that are on your computer, like they don't hurt you right now, that little blue button that says you're on, but you put that on an automobile, you can blind someone. Right. Everything is toxic. It's how much do you get exposed and how much of it can be filtered. And even visible light band. So we're here, but for the grace of God. And we're very fragile. That's why this Petri dish is out on the rim, not down in galactic center. Sol has protection with the heliosphere, and our solar system has the Oort cloud.
Well, I think we're getting to a point where it's a good stopping point, and like you said, we can continue with another episode. I would like to give you a chance to again, just like on the last episode,
promote myself. Just
promote your books.
Yeah. Go to my website. That's all you do. And I have a bunch of books. There are things there. If you're overseas, like Canada or Europe, the shipping costs more than the book. And so what I've tried to do is put specials together, especially for when I'm shipping to Canada or European purchases like Switzerland or whatever. And the way Amazon does it is they have a performance center over there. So they can ship it book rate rather than first class. First class is expensive when you start shipping large things like books. That's why I have ebooks. That's one of the reasons I went to ebooks. How much of that do you think is going to survive on the internet when the grid goes down? And who owns on Microsoft 11? Who owns all that intellectual property up on the cloud? Like mRNA was used to take control of your physical body because there's a law that if it changes your DNA, you belong to the pharmaceutical house that did that. There's a bunch of shit going on. All around me, being hemmed in. When you get a choice, take the right path or the left path, they both lead to the slaughterhouse.
So, like I asked before, and I'm curious with your new, knowledge and everything, for someone looking to get into all the material that you have, what book would you recommend them starting with?
Nick Begich was one of my first patrons who got me started writing again. I did herbs and spices farming for Chuck Walters. I started writing the potential of herbs as a cash crop. Then in agriculture, I have a 9-volume encyclopedia on alternative ag, cross-referenced. These are crops that have limited markets, but what do you want to grow? And I'm going to stress the importance of producing a minimum of 40% of the food you consume. If you can do that locally, you have a high likelihood of surviving before the zombie attacks. Zombies are individuals that are out of food. And we got 3 minutes for air, 3 days for water, and 3 weeks for food. What's important? That's a teaching that we used to do with Matt Stein and I. We nailed it for them. They already got bunkers everywhere. However, I just bought a Winnebago, an old one, because no matter how solid your bunker is, it's important to have option of being mobile, where you can move quickly to somewhere else, nomadic. And I've got bunkers all over North America that I oversee. I don't manage them. I oversee them. I go in with the kids that are managing them, and I might make a suggestion, like Telluride. They're armed and dangerous down there because of LA. Each one has its own positives and unknowns, negatives. And I don't know what's actually going to happen. Fault lines, one to Fuca fault, blah, blah, blah. We can guess, and that's where you get all your different maps of the future. Scallion, things like that. Each one has a little different metal on it. Yellowstone, when it goes, did you know that Yellowstone and Mauna Kea went off at the same moment 5 days ago?
No.
Oh, man. Volcanoes are going off everywhere. That's because Betelgeuse's radiation just hit Sol on June 1st. And we're going to have events now, like the grid going down, and then volcanoes going off to the point where on the West Coast, where are you located? You're on the East Coast, the Midwest? Where are you located?
I'm in the Midwest.
That's going to be when the Missouri and the Mississippi join together and cut America in two. And it starts all the way up, way up north of Canada. And the West Coast, when that volcano off of Crescent City goes off, it's in the ocean. It goes off every 13 years or so. But now they just this morning came out with a major news that Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helen, and Mount Hood are all on the same magma. What does that mean? Well, Edgar Casey said it will be Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helens, and Mount Olympus. When they go, Seattle is gone. And a little island will form called New Jerusalem. And I'm going to say that that's any week now. I don't know that. Might be in a couple years. 2054, the song 2054, the song 2012. Nobody knows. The wiggle room is there. You can count on it, however. And so I'm going to suggest that you start preparing now, so that you have a go bag. That's within 10 minutes, you can grab what you need and you're out the door. That's it. You don't have any warning now. And you produce 40% of the food you consume. If you can do that, Now you'll have some food you can barter, and it'll be your neighbor that saves your life.
Yeah.
As a
I
metaphor.
knew about the volcano near Hawaii, but I didn't know about Yellowstone.
Yeah, it's in the news
Italy.
3 days ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And Italy just had an eruption too, Mount Etna.
It's going on because you can count on it. And now that you know about it, what are you going to do about it? And that's a new Netflix movie, a semi-comedy called Don't Look Up. And you'll see the metaphor in that movie. Exactly. Kevin Bacon, some others. It's excellent.
Well, I guess
You do. Medic, we got another one.
yeah, I'm trying to think how to leave the
Bring the
show on
nurse
a
in. That'll
positive.
bring it back.
It's like, yeah, I'm trying
Nurse
to think.
Ratchet. That's who we're going. Dr. Caligari. That would bring those guys in. Have a good laugh. Forgot about that, didn't you? Yeah. See, that's what I do for the military. I make them remember things they forgot. I'm good with eidetic memory. I'm a little brat. I got a train set for Christmas, though. Can I show it to you? I'm going to do like Gomez down in the basement with it.
Yeah.
Excited. I love that dark humor.
We need it. Well, we need humor, any humor, as long as we're laughing.
Yeah, you've got to have fun because you don't have anything to say about it.
Very true, and laughter helps keep you balanced, I think.
I hope, last evil in Pandora's box, thank you, Lord. Evil, yeah. My hope is that I've given people enough of a viewpoint that they like to start thinking about what if and discovering who they are, whether they don't care, they do care. I'm going to probably kick after I'm dead. Shoot him again, he's still moving. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. But, and I'm going to start doing a series of podcasts. I don't have a team yet. I don't have a webmaster. And when Google put in that AI, it changed the algorithm so that people don't, like when you do a thing, it won't come up at first. Just Google my name, Dr. Richard Allen Miller. That ought to freak you out in terms of what I've done in my past. I like who I am. I actually am trying to do me, and I make mistakes, and I'm trying to grow from that. Ew, there's warts, But that's what we all do, and just to realize we're unique, and we don't have very much control. Control is a fantasy. Remember, that was Castaneda. Talked about fear, first enemy. The second enemy was power. Third enemy was when you started seeing things more clearly. And of course, the fourth enemy is May, old age. Too old to do anything about it. I love Castaneda. That's where the bilocation thing is. And in my holographic concept of reality, that book I wrote, the non-local mind, I have a picture as a lead into one of the chapters showing Don Gennaro. Peter First and I went down way back and Don Juan was a composite. Don Gennaro actually existed. He glides from one hill to the other like a flying squirrel does. And we got that on camera. And we took photos just like I did up in Tibet with these, using horns. There's technology that does paranormal. And the last thing I want to leave you with, I guess this is the important part. Magic with a C, for me, is hair in your pocket, sleight of hand. And magic with a K, sleight of mind, where you use your mind as a tool. It's not secret knowledge and, blue lodges doing terrible things, interlodge. It's using your mind. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. That is what Magic with a K is about. Using your mind as a tool. Change your belief system like you would a pair of clothing. In fact, you do. You just aren't aware of it.
Well, thank you for coming on and sharing with us. And I'm so grateful that we were able to do it live and have some interaction with the chat room. And
Maybe you'll think about it later. What do we do?
and Derek says he likes your energy. He says you have great energy.
Well, whatever energy is, it didn't seem to work very well with my Winnebago, 6 miles to a gallon. It's less than $1,000 to convert gasoline, petroleum into hydrogen using water. You can pee in it.
I've often wondered why we don't have cars that run on water. We have cars that run on battery.
Because greed is good and war is good for business.
No, but thank you so much, and thank you to everyone for tuning in. And we will definitely work on getting you back on again. We have so much fun when you're on, and you have so much information to share. And I feel like every episode we get deeper and deeper, but yet we're still on that tip of the iceberg.
Well, that's because we're still sugar ants and we never got a chance to evolve into something more than a little gray being tortured at Groom Lake. Actually, she was a tall gray. The ones they found at Roswell were small because they designed the bodies to be habiting a smaller environment when space and time aren't real. What does that mean? Time wakey wakey, full of Croc Dundee. Wakey wakey. I love those movies. Visuals. That's what it's about. Aesthetic memory.
Yeah, so thank you so much, and we will be in touch to schedule another episode when schedules permit. And please, everyone, I normally don't ask this, but if anything has piqued your interest in tonight's episode, go to his website, look at the books, find and see if there's any books that resonate with the topic you are interested in. Purchase the book and read the book. Do some
Well,
research.
don't learn from me. Study. That's when you take something of mine and make it yours. And the way you do it is differently than the way I might do it. That's the distinction between learning something and studying. Very important difference.
Yes.
Integrated into your own thing.
Yes. Feel free to use his information as a jumping board to new ideas and bring them to the show. And next time he's on, maybe we'll be able to have questions where you, as the audience, bring up your theories and we ask the doctor what he thinks of your theories, and you guys can go and see if it's.
Well, they already did that with entertainment. What is that TV show called? Where they get someone up and they give them up thumb, down thumbs, and
Oh, what was that show?
yeah, see, I gotcha. Okay, we've done it just enough for you. Now you don't know quite what to do with that one and bother you for the next week.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that one up because I'm like,
That's what I want you to do is start thinking. Yep. Thinking is allowed.
thinking is necessary.
Well, maybe. Maybe.
Thinking the right way is necessary. Let's put it that
What do you
way.
mean going to the right, not the left turns? I guess that.
You can never go wrong if you keep going right.
Yeah, but just before you pass out, a signed 6-foot waffle iron is going to giggle at you that if you're digging it now, wait till the rush hits.
All right, so thank you, and thank you to everyone, and have a wonderful evening. and we'll see you on the next episode. And to all my fans out there who are watching, please remember to click the like button and feel free to drop a comment if you feel inclined. I do respond to all the comments, so thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night, and we will see you on the next episode. Good night, everyone.
Guten Abend.